Grant Shapps says the government has set out how it'll back aviation by easing the pressures on airlines, and now it's up to them and airports to set realistic schedules. Well, earlier I spoke to travel expert Julia Lo Bue-Said, CEO of Advantage Travel Partnership, which is a network of travel agents right across the UK, and I started by asking her what she thought was causing all the chaos.
I think the reality is when an industry that's been shut down for 2 years starts to rebuild itself, inevitably, unfortunately, there are operational challenges with an infrastructure that literally is reliant on every global part to kind of connect, and so many moving parts. The reality, the vast majority of flights will depart on time without disruption now. That's never any consolation for anybody at all that's caught up in any of the kind of awful scenes that we've seen. But that is the reality. The vast majority of flights will still depart on time and take people to the destinations that they've booked.
And in terms of whether it's going to be difficult all summer or whether it'll get better, say, by August, do we have any idea whether it can improve in the next few weeks as we see the summer season take off?
I think it's really difficult to give kind of any cast iron guarantee. I mean, what we're definitely seeing is, every week that goes past, certainly since the last busy half term, which was back in May, we've seen things improving. There are situations where you have one-off instances which unfortunately are not great, and that does create uncertainty for travellers. But alongside industry and with government, there's a lot that's going on to really make sure that we can give customer certainty. One of the things that is happening right now is caps on some flights from some of the airports. So Heathrow and Gatwick have introduced that. And really, whilst that's not great if your flight has been cancelled, what the point of that is that you will be given notice, you'll be put on alternative flights, and it really is about trying to minimise those kind of last minute disruptions, which are really, really difficult to deal with.
I think some flights have been cancelled, though, this week without any notice, haven't they?
They have, and that's awful. I mean, I know a flight, I had colleagues travelling back from somewhere in Italy today, and the flight went tech. Now, unfortunately, at the best of times, that's never great. And unfortunately, those things still happen. Airlines don't have planes lying around and staff around and to kind of get crew back on board and move planes and people quickly. So unfortunately there will be issues. We're expecting, as we have seen, the pent up demand. There is a really great appetite to travel, and really what we've got to make sure collectively happens is that the disruptions are minimised, and consumers are handheld and made sure that we can give them the dreams and holidays they aspire to, that they've booked for and aspire to go on.
We've seen a lot of very frustrated passengers there, haven't they, saying that they've had no information, no explanation, no warning. I mean, I know I've had a couple of flights already where they've cancelled it and they've offered me a couple of other options, but they're at the other end of the day in a completely different airport, and we're sort of braced for that. But should the government be doing more, for example, or should the industry be doing more, in terms of pay to try to get more people to come back and work in the airlines and in the airports?
I think no sector, no economic sector that is found itself in a position where it's struggling to attract new talent or attract talent back into this industry is doing anything intentionally to avoid that. So I think absolutely that what we must be doing now, and we're seeing it right across every kind of economic industry really, is trying to attract staff back in. I think the issue you have with something like travel at the moment is, if you want to go to work for an industry that is constantly, with negative headlines and looks a bit stressful, I'm not sure it's most attractive to want to attract staff into at the moment. So I think the image and profile of the sector isn't helping. It depends on where in the industry you're working. There are challenges trying to get the right security passes and clearances that need to go through. So there are some bottlenecks. But, again, the sector.
Why are the delays there?
In the main, those are at the airport and for airlines, so they need to get security clearance. And what that essentially means is having to go through every potential new recruit, go through all their employment records. So some staff may have had 3, 4, 5 jobs in the last 2 years, and you need to security check and do employment checks for every single one of those. So it's the logistics behind just how long it takes to get references and the checks that need to take place. So it really is a backlog of trying to process so many at one time.
What about Brexit? Is that a factor? Because I think we saw some requests for the government to relax visas to get more people in to try to boost employee numbers, and that was turned down, I think.
It was refused. And that, I guess the reality is Brexit has had an impact. We have, employees that were EU, from the EU, and unfortunately now are no longer here. So you create an issue for a workforce that is already challenged, that is already restricted, and you take a proportion of those out of the pool, and we are left with less individuals that we can employ, and that's the reality. It has caused that. So that is one of the deciding factors, absolutely.
Do you know what percentage of staff are missing because of that?
Well, across the whole, if I take travel and hospitality, 30%, depends on the regions, but something like 30% of hospitality, including travel, were EU workers. In some parts of the country, so London, it's even higher. And I was in, and actually, I have to say, Geeta, it's not just the UK. I was in Spain a couple of weeks ago, speaking to hotels there, and they're really struggling. There is a real movement of people at the moment, and they're struggling to get the right people that have just left the industry for different reasons and different situations.
So, if the government could do more than this plan that they've announced, what would you urge them to do?
I think, relaxing some of the visa requirements around Brexit, I think that would be a start, because actually what we can do then is attract individuals that have expertise and have experience. So because it's great bringing new talent into an industry, but actually if you're losing expertise, still not where you need to be. So I think anything that encourages expertise from the EU, from around the globe to come and enjoy working for the sector, I think that's something that would be encouraged.
And in terms of how much disruption people should realistically expect, because I appreciate you're obviously in the travel business and you want to encourage everyone to keep travelling, and there is a real sort of sense of a pent-up demand for that. But people are braced already, aren't they, for a level of disappointment, chaos, delay. What proportion of flights would you say might be affected?
Well, up until now, around between 2 and 4% of flights have been affected. But it really does vary, because it is absolutely not at every airport. It's not at every airline. Different airlines have had different challenges and more disruptions. What we're really encouraging everyone to think about is a number of things. One is to make sure that, if you are travelling, when you're at the airport, disruption is also delayed. So making sure you've got all your documentation, making sure you've got everything ready. Check your passport. Lots of changes on passports that people are getting caught out at the last minute, and make sure you've got everything there. And I would say if you're travelling in the summer holidays, like some of us, have done for many years, even pre-pandemic, it's always really busy. It's always a bit of a pandemonium at the airports. Go there thinking that you might have a bit of a delay. Don't get to the airport too early, but give yourself a bit of time, and just make sure that you are, not spending lots of time in restaurants and shops, etc. Just in case, just to do everything you can to try and minimise any of those disruptions that may just bottleneck and may help you get through the airport as quickly as possible.
And are you able to tell us which airlines and which airports are better? Or which ones to avoid?
Well, there really are none to avoid. I think that, there isn't I've looked at different reports, and there really isn't a consistent pattern. It's very difficult. All we can do is make sure that in the event of any disruptions, again, it does depend how people book. It does depend who they book through, because if they're booking through if they're booking a package holiday with a tour operator through a travel agent, then there's somebody there that they can literally pick the phone up and really handhold. And the best thing that they can also do is offer alternatives. I think one of the issues with some of the aviation plan that the government have come out with this week, one of the issues there is actually it's all about when something goes wrong and what you can do. And what we need to be thinking about is actually how do we make sure consumers are in the best possible position so that they can not preempt any disruptions, but make sure that if they need support, if they need a hand, they know exactly where to find that information, where to go to.
If it's going to be difficult this summer, when will it be sorted out, do you think? Is it going to be, if people are thinking about winter breaks in December at Christmas or next Easter? I mean, how long is it going to take?
It's going to take some time to work its way through. As I said before, 2 years shut down, rebuilding literally overnight. All those component parts that you've got to fix together. It's a result of the pandemic and the restrictions that were in place, and it's going to take some time. But it is worth remembering that the vast majority of flights will depart, will take people to their destinations without any disruption.